Are you ready to make the most of your oil and gas mineral rights? Welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. Get the knowledge and resources you need to manage your minerals and royalties. Here is your host, Matt Sands.
Hello and welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sands, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Williams, and we're here to help you make the most of your minerals and royalties. In this episode, we're going to talk about how AI can save you time and money in managing your minerals and royalties. And Justin, this is an area that we were talking, for a long time before we hit record, just because there's so much going on in this space, so many different new tools that are out there tailored towards, industry professionals, but as well as for mineral and royalty owners. And many of them are leveraging artificial intelligence or AI. And that's a buzzword that everybody hears about. But today we're going to give real deep dive and talk about specific ways that after listening to this episode, you can leverage AI to make things easier, streamline, just really get ahead of the curve, so to speak, in managing your minerals and royalties. It's been a game changer for me. I don't know about you, how you've been using it, Justin.
It's become part of my everyday, that's for sure. And it's amazing the things that you can do with it. It's also, I think, it can be a little intimidating to realize some of the things that you can do with it or some of the things you shouldn't do with it. It's really evolved over the last, 2 to 3 years that we've been using it, from being something that, it's cool to see what it does, to, wow, this really saves me a ton of time in digesting information and providing summaries.
Yeah.
So Matt, let's dive in. And I think reviewing your royalty statements for red flags is one of the top ones that I've used it for. As those checks come in, you can take a look at them, have it tell you some of the issues that you could take a look at. But it's not in lieu of knowing what to check, Matt.
Yeah, that's just right. I think that's going to be the key theme to remember here is AI isn't going to replace the need to understand what you're looking at, understand minerals and royalties. It is like turning up the dial on the amplifier, right? It's like the volume of what you can do and the things that you can achieve in a shorter time period, just making it more efficient, more effective. But you have to know and be able to check what the work that it comes up with for errors, for hallucinations and making up stuff. So I will say that really makes it even more important, I think, to understand the basics around minerals and royalties and oil and gas. And there's 2 tie-ins, and obviously one of them is my mineral management basics course, which I go through the different types of oil and gas interest, how to perform a title search, how to review those documents, how to document them in a run sheet, which is a spreadsheet basically that lists all your deeds and leases and all the important things like that. But having a basic understanding about, how to find your interests on a map, how to look at what type of oil and gas activities nearby can help you leverage AI to then make those very time efficient and, time saving queries and prompts to AI to help you answer a question that you have about your property. And I think you mentioned a really good use case around royalty statements. And I think is a great place to start, because we get copies of our revenue statements in PDF form, let's say, or sometimes even in, hard copy. The power of AI is then being able to take a photo of that or a PDF of your royalty statement and upload it to a tool like ChatGPT or Claude and ask it to explain what each of those line items mean in plain language. You can take the concepts, the concept level and definitions of things, and translate it into numbers that are actually on your revenue statement, and then ask it to review it and find discrepancies. And maybe you can upload 2 or 3 different revenue statements and ask it to compare and look for red flags. For example, one potential use case would be in your prompt, you might upload those revenue statements and you would ask, my net revenue interest on this well is listed as whatever number it is. This month it was this number, and this other month it was a different number. Can you help explain and help me understand why it might have changed and what questions I should ask my operator? And then it'll come up and analyze the data and say, well, yeah, you're right. Here's a discrepancy. Well, here's what I see, as far as that. And then it'll look as its general knowledge based on what it's been trained on, or searching the internet. It can also do that and find relevant articles, relevant information for these types of discrepancies and summarize that and then give you an answer based on the resources that are out there that you would have to spend hours on your own, doing a Google search and reviewing all the articles and understanding the nuances, whereas AI can do that search in, a minute or so and then give you a response and help you really shortcut to the answer and even have a draft email for your owner relations department of your operator to ask the specific question to address that discrepancy that AI was able to spot, or red flag that you were able to identify in your royalty statement. So in my mind, that is something that could be a very quick and easy win to leverage AI to really potentially uncover money that you're owed. And this could be also something where the opportunities are endless, Justin. I can think of a few other use cases around maybe, if you've gotten paid at a certain time period and you think you maybe get, owed interest, it's to have AI review the statutes in that state and identify what the law and regulations are and what your rights are, and then tell you, oh yeah, it looks like this was the production month. Here's when you got paid. They were late, and identify those potential claims that you might have to claim interest. So there's all kinds of things you can do with this. But again, it really starts with having that foundation. And then there's also other resources out there like Narrow's mineral management program, I would say, is a great foundational tool specifically around this use case, around understanding your royalty statement. And if you have that training, because they go through specifically how to review the revenue statement and look at different columns and calculate different numbers, and having that knowledge can help you leverage AI to do it quicker and faster, but you really still got to know what you're looking at.
And you have to know what data to give it. I think that's one of the parts too, that it can be easily missed. Another thing I've noticed it's really great at, especially when it comes to reviewing and kind of spotting red flags, is giving you the questions to ask the operator. Times that can be tricky. You want to sound like you know what you're talking about, but also ask the right question. And AI can really help with that. Another thing it can be really good at, Matt, is looking at long documents, especially standardized documents like oil and gas leases. This is something, again, you have to be careful of, and you have to know what it's talking about to really understand what comes from it. But it can really save you a lot of time in summarizing it, or even, bringing up certain clauses that you should look at, certain sections to review, questions to ask, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've used AI for this as well. And to your point, it can be an amazing resource to identify line by line. And you have to, again, take it with a grain of salt, because it's going to give you the laundry list of, well, here's all the potential red flags or unfavorable clauses. But, this is a great tool in a lease negotiation, because you can upload the oil and gas lease that you're being offered. And that, again, you could just upload the PDF document into Claude, for example. And specifically, Claude is a good one for reviewing legal documents. In my experience, it's kind of really well suited for that. Obviously, the disclaimer is anything that you do related to contracts or legal reviews, should be reviewed by a qualified attorney that's licensed in the state where your minerals are located, certainly at least as a final check before you submit your red lines or your changes to the landman that's offering you the lease, for example, in this case. But I've used it for this and asked it to summarize the key lease terms in plain language, and then offer alternate language for things like pooling, if you want a PU clause. So that's vertical or horizontal wise, and then cost-free language for limiting post-production deductions, or shut-in royalty provisions, so that, they have limitations on how long that they can hold the lease by paying you shut-in royalties and things like that. So I think AI is extremely powerful for this. And sorry to all the attorneys out there, and it doesn't substitute the final review by an attorney, but the way I see it is it's a good complement to working with an attorney, because as a mineral owner, it can save you a lot of time and energy in the back and forth and working with your attorney and with the landman. It could be, you could have AI or Claude, come up with a list of potential language, get that reviewed by your attorney, and they might make a few little changes here and there. And that could save hours of time with the attorney and have them having to draft that, giving that to them. We've mentioned this many times before AI even was a thing. We mentioned going out to the county records and looking for other leases that were recorded in your county that had the favorable language that was through, professional mineral buyer that was doing this, or somebody that was a institutional organization that had, attorneys on staff and that were reviewing these leases, and that had, excellent language in there that you could include in a markup of a lease, and using that as a starting point to give to your attorney, rather than having them draft it if you're on a budget, right? If you want to just save a little bit of time. AI is really filling that need now, I think, to a large extent. But again, to your point, Justin, you have to be very careful on how you prompt it. and you have to make sure that it's using case law and it's not making stuff up. I did this at the very beginning a few years ago with ChatGPT. Hey, well, I want to look at what cases are related to this particular issue, and it made up stuff. Like these cases didn't exist. It just was hallucinating. That term is used with AI is when it makes up things. And so you got to be very careful with that. But if you are very specific with your prompt, the more information you feed it, the better the response you're going to get and the more accurate it will be. So if you have specific legal articles from, attorneys and from other things like that you can refer to it and provide as input to your query, to your prompt, and have it search those, and then also tell you whenever it cites a legal case to provide a hyperlink where it found that so that you can fact check it. And I think that's very important to do with AI in general as we're talking through all of this, is to be able to double check what you're getting, that it's actually accurate. So I don't know, those are my takes on the lease negotiation, but I think this is a huge area of opportunity for mineral owners that you could do today if you're negotiating a lease. That's
right, Matt. And it can help you to know what questions to ask. I think that's a really powerful thing when it comes to speaking with an attorney. Like you said, it's not a replacement for that review, but it can certainly make sure that you've taken a look at everything, you're asking all the right questions, and it's easy for us to miss something, especially when you're reading a lease that's 50 to 60 pages. All right, Matt. So calculating your net revenue interest, this is one that I think is, it's really very useful for. I mean, it's something we still have to double check. However, it can do some of these really complicated math calculations as long as you provided all the variables it needs.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be feeding it the right information. Like they say, garbage in, garbage out. But, this is a great place to use AI where it's a very rote, simple calculation. Eliminates the human error potentially of you mistyping in a number or something like that. But if you have to then, make sure you're feeding it the correct information, review those numbers, that they're accurate. And one example of a prompt that you could use would be to train the AI over time. And you can do this where each time you don't have to enter this same information over and over, but you can create a project, is what they call it in Claude, for example, where you can upload copies of your documents. You can tell it, here's my inventory. Here's how many net acres I own in each of these tracts. Here's the gross acreage. Here is the royalty rate. And you can feed all that information in. And then you say, hey, I got a division order for some new wells that were drilled. And this is the legal description for those properties. Here's the tract that is in that unit. Help me understand. And can you verify the net revenue interest for this well based on the unit acreage size, the net mineral acres that I own, and my royalty rate? What is my expected net interest, and how do I verify this against my division order? And it'll give you the number, and then it'll give you some tips to review the division order and what to look for to cross-check it and make sure it's correct. So it can help streamline that review process with your division order. But again, it goes back to why I would highlight the mineral management program within Narrow is a great resource to understanding how to do that, because that is part of that curriculum that you learn if you sign up for that program. But what it can do is, especially if you get multiple division orders, you have lots of different properties, you don't have a lot of time to sit down and manually do this. AI can help you do it quickly if you've trained it on what you own and all the particular facts that it needs in order to do that calculation. So that could be a big time saver as well.
We have an episode, Matt, on net mineral acres versus net royalty acres. This is one of the things that folks early on in the journey, it's really easy to confuse these two. So take a look at that episode. It's certainly something to take a look at. Matt also has a free net royalty acre calculator worksheet, which could help you to get some of those formulas to give AI. I found, depending on which one you're using, a lot of times specifying the formula you'd like to use is really one of the best things to kind of get it to give you a consistent answer. Another thing is organizing and summarizing your documents. I think it could be a big help in that. It also could help you to see what information was key in documents. For instance, if we upload a deed, it'll tell you who was the grantor, who was the grantee, and what was granted, which can save a lot of time if you're looking through a large stack of deeds or transfers or assignments or whatever it is.
Yeah, and this is an area where I think if you're leveraging AI in addition to performing the title search. And so I show you how to do a title search in my Mineral Management Basics course. But the way I see that AI can help you streamline that whole process is once you get copies of all your deeds and leases, it can read the text in many of those documents as long as they're legible and take that into actually converting it into data, into a spreadsheet, right? So you can use it to take that PDF document and turn it into an editable format, like a Excel spreadsheet of those format, the format that a typical run sheet is in, where it would list the book and page or the reception number, the date, the grantor, the grantee, the legal description, and then a little blurb or information about what it is and the type of document. Like you could have it go through and read those documents and populate a run sheet. And specifically, this is something you could do, I think, potentially with a free AI or with, a paid plan like with Claude or with ChatGPT. Now you'd have to go through and spot check it and double check that it actually read those deeds correctly. But this type of use case is actually one of the things that the industry is leveraging significantly right now in streamlining title review process and reading and interpreting instruments and legal documents, and then tying them all together. It can sort of create that chain of title and sort of automate a lot of that process. And the human has to go in and double check it and confirm it and make sure that it's correct. But there are specialized tools used in the industry that are really streamlining the process of running title. And that's one area that AI is, I think, was leveraged at the beginning and within the minerals and royalty space, just because it's such a time-consuming task. And it's something that, if you can get it to read a document like a PDF file and convert it into unstructured data, like in a spreadsheet, that's just a huge time saver, because otherwise you're having to manually key that stuff in, right? So it's those types of tasks that are very helpful. And I think within organizing and summarizing your documents, the version of that for mineral and royalty owners is, if you have, for example, a specific use case that I've used this for is I have a PDF file that was scanned from a document from 50 years ago that is an inventory of assets that was on like a personal representative's deed. So like an Exhibit A in that deed that has all the legal descriptions of all the mineral tracts and all that information. And I've taken it, uploaded it into Claude, given it a specific prompt, and then had it spit out a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet that now I have that information in a way that I can manipulate it. I can calculate net mineral acres, again, based on legal descriptions and the fractions that are mentioned, and have it calculate the decimal. So I can have like 1/12 of 1/160th interest in, whatever the legal description is. And, if I know the gross acreage, I can have it calculate what that 1/12 times 1/60th or whatever number is, and put that in a column, and then use that to quickly calculate my net mineral acres without having to go through and type in each of those fractions and calculate it manually. So those are the types of things that are very quick that you can use it today. So if you don't have an inventory of all of your assets, I would encourage you to think about using the free prompt that I'm going to put together for you. So if you don't know where to start with AI, we'll give you sort of the step-by-step of how to do this, and copy and paste the language in there and use it to help digitize your records, and starting with your inventory of the properties that you own. I think that's one of the most powerful things that everybody should have, is a simple tracking spreadsheet, right? That has the legal description of your property, if it's leased, what the lease royalty rate is, the operator, if it's still under the primary term, when does that lease expire? All of those things. So at a glance, you have on a one page or, one document, everything that you can have, which is the starting point for estate planning, right? Is to have a handle on all the things that you own. And so you need to have that no matter what stage you are in your journey. So this is something that we'll have a prompt that you can use AI to help digitize this in minutes, which would take you hours to enter manually into a spreadsheet. And so we'll have that as a download. So just go to mineralrightspodcast.com and look for this episode. And there'll be a link in the show notes where you can download that free prompt guide and how to do that. But this is, I think, one of the areas where you see massive time savings in using AI is for going through lots of documents, digitizing records. Where have you used it, and what do you see sort of the areas where this is being used by mineral owners as well?
I think you've mentioned a lot of them, Matt, which is it saves you a ton of time in going through documents, creating those spreadsheets, researching information. If you know exactly what question to ask, can also be pretty useful. To kind of answer the question from a different way, the things that I've noticed it's not very good at yet is finding information like production information. It depends on what state you're in, I'm sure, but the systems aren't quite sophisticated enough yet to use, for instance, the Texas RCC production query system. So there's some limitations when it comes into that. But Matt, it's been really useful for collecting that information in an easy way for me to copy and paste so that I can go do the looking up where I need to do that. And then even analyzing the data that I find in correlation with whatever question I'm trying to answer. So it still has some limitations, but as you practice, you'll find out what it's really good at and some of the best ways to work with it.
Yeah, and I think that leads into this next use case around tracking activity near your minerals. Do you want to talk about where AI is being used or maybe the things that are being developed to help in this space?
Yeah, so I think with AI, Matt, what we've noticed is that on the industry side, this is kind of where some of the larger companies are focusing on leveraging AI is in using their data, whether it be on drilling permits from the states. This can be a lot of this information is publicly available, but there's many interfaces that bring that information into their platform, and they're utilizing AI to be able to review that information. And I haven't seen many places where mineral owners can take advantage of this for free, but there are certainly a lot of paid services, both industry targeted and a few free ones that are coming out for mineral owners that allow you to do some pretty complicated things.
Yeah, I will say that just as a disclaimer, one company that comes to mind is SS&C Mineralware, and they are a sponsor of the show. But there are tools that are automated, and even before AI was really fully leveraged, it's something that solutions like Mineralware and others there's many others that do this as well. But in terms of identifying discrepancies in your revenue statement from month to month. An example of that would be, you normally get paid each month by this operator on this well, and then it skips a month for some reason. It'll flag that for you to go and look at. So it's, then starting to look at deeper queries around production and, using all of the data that these platforms have access to then run these more complicated queries on data to see, well, the production dropped. Maybe that well was still on that next month's revenue statement, but the production dropped by 50%. It can flag those types of things and look at more nuanced type of trends and things like that. Another area I think that this is really powerful is, like you said, Justin, this is something that I'm still working on how to use some of the free AI tools. And if I do crack the code on getting access to, example, the Texas Railroad Commission production data and identifying like spatial queries and some of the more complicated things that probably require writing custom code to do, which as a side note, you can get AI to do for you. You don't have to be a software developer anymore to get those types of custom tools necessarily. And so one of the things that I think is, in the future, you could potentially leverage, and there's companies that are building fit for purpose tools for mineral and royalty owners and investors and things like that are doing some of these things based on data that they control, and they can put, unleash the AI within that API, within the access to that massive data warehouse that it has of all the production data, latitude and longitudes, and do like some very complicated queries that can be automated with AI. But what I'm getting at is being able to go into AI and saying, hey, I want to identify new rigs, new permits, new pooling orders near all of my mineral tracts. And right now you have to use these custom industry level tools to do that. And there are tools out there, like we mentioned, Mineralware being one of them. And there's others as well that do give you a notification each week if there's a new rig that shows up or a new well that's being drilled. Or new permits or things like that. But some things you can do besides that, there are free tools like Well Database, which I use for my consulting practice. They have a free basic plan that allows you to view production data and well information for properties across the country. So you can go into those tools and again, use that somewhat manually, but then perhaps set up Google alerts for your county name. And to the extent that some of those documents are searchable via the web, like, for example, a pooling order, if it shows up in Oklahoma and has something where it can be referenced to a legal land description, it's possible that you could use AI or a Google alert at least to identify those new pooling orders as they show up, and then you can review them or have AI go in and identify that for you. The tricky part that I found is using free, like a ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, and you say, hey, I want to go identify any wells on my properties. Here's my land descriptions. The way that these websites are coded is to prevent search engines and AI tools like those from accessing that information, partially to block some of that so it doesn't overload their website. So that's not possible yet, but I think over time there'll be ways around that and ways to get access to that information that would be very cost effective, if not free, for mineral and royalty owners as this AI kind of propagates through the industry. So that's another, I'd say, a potential use case in the future. But in the meantime, you can have it do a Google search for well permits, or, like I said, pooling or spacing orders, if that data is searchable in your state oil and gas commission website now, on Google. So that could be something that you could do today.
Well, Matt, something that I think is an issue that a lot of people face, unfortunately, we don't think about it enough ahead of time, but is estate planning. Collecting this information, ensuring that you pass this information on to the next generation. No small task, but it's definitely somewhere that AI can help you to collect that information, understand some of the key things you need to have, and then also, again, have those conversations with your attorney.
That's a great point. And I think that goes back to that asset inventory and why that's so important, because that's the first thing that your attorney is going to ask for as to what do you own? What type of assets do you have that you're going to want to pass down? And that'll help dictate, how they can give you the best legal advice on how to most efficiently and effectively do that. So that's where you can, like I said, that's where we'll have that free prompt that'll help you do that. But the other thing around estate planning is, asking AI to come up with questions to ask your attorney. Say, here's my situation, here are my goals and what I want to do. Please help draft questions or things I need to tell my attorney to make sure that we get what we want in that estate plan. The other thing you can do is ask it questions about, hey, what are the risks or benefits around holding these types of interests in a trust versus an LLC? And based on those trade-offs, what do I need to ask my attorney to make sure that I get the right, entity type for my needs? But what are some other things you can think of around that whole process where AI could be leveraged?
Knowing what questions to ask is really one of the main ones. I think AI is probably best at that. When it comes to looking through things, it can help you to kind of formulate exactly what questions you should be asking. And also how to ask those questions in an informed way. Really great at drafting letters, can answer some specific questions. So when it comes to mineral rights, it's a bit unique in estate planning and has its own things to consider. It can really help you to navigate that, maybe understand some of the information from interviewing estate attorneys about what they've said and then whether they would be a good candidate. And then building spreadsheets, man, I think it's really fantastic at that. Many of us have PDF copies of these deeds, and it can very easily format that from a text format into a spreadsheet format, or even extract that specific information that you need.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway here is it really just streamlines that whole process of working with your estate attorney to achieve your goals as far as that goes. But I want to go back to that letter writing comment that you made, Justin, because I think that's an amazing use case as well. These tools have gotten, I would say, noticeably better over the past couple of years at writing documents, writing letters. It sounds less and less like AI generated the more time goes on. And particularly if you teach it your voice, so you can give it examples of your writing style, previous letters you've written, and say, hey, using my voice, you write a letter, in this case, like you mentioned, write a letter to my heirs explaining my goals and and all the things about you can put specific things about your kids in there, just so that when they read your will and they have that kind of heartfelt letter that goes with it, and it can help just sort of trigger the memory, give you a starting point, and then you have to obviously go in and do the work yourself and write from the heart. You don't want just AI generated form letter for your heirs. But in my mind, that whole writer's block thing is a thing of the past, because you can have AI at least help you with an outline or help you with like where to get started. And then that can be just having something to start with is oftentimes that snowball rolling down the hill. Say, okay, I can get started. I know I don't need to worry about the format or what this needs to look like. I can just focus on what I want to say and then have it like do some of the things to make it look professional and really tidy it up and make sure it covers all the bases. And so that's where I think AI is super helpful, because oftentimes, it's hard to know where to get started, whether it's writing a letter, like in this case, or drafting an email to an operator about an issue you're having, and just explaining what the situation is and say, hey, write a letter for me that's does these things and it's to this person or this company. And here's the questions I have, and here's, put this in professional language and da 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 da, and it'll like spit it out. And it's like probably 80 or 90% of the way there. And you have to do some editing and tweaking and expanding or fixing things, but it'll get you so much closer to what you're looking to do in a much quicker time period, I think is the takeaway here. But you gave a little bit of a caveat on where AI, when it can't be used, or what maybe you need to be considerate of, and when using AI. What are some of the potential pitfalls that we need to think about here, Justin?
The one that we hear a lot, and it can be a bit of a buzzword, but AI can hallucinate. So this is where ensuring that you really have a foundation and mineral knowledge and can understand the information that it's giving you is really important. Sometimes it can very confidently give you incorrect information, whether that be legal or technical details. It's really important to ensure that you have this reviewed by somebody who's qualified, and ensure that you double check the information that AI gives you. Another pitfall that I think is easy to fall into is we'd like to think that AI can find all the information or any information we need. Many times you have to provide that information to it, and it's not going to be able to go find your deeds. It often can't find production information, and what it does find might be outdated. So that's something to really consider. Also, specific state law is something that you have to be a bit careful with. If you're in a state like Texas and talking about an issue like unleased co-tenants that's very specific to Texas, you've got to ensure that you're getting information that is specific to that state law. And this is where you can get some great information or great questions to ask, some great information, but it's worth talking with that licensed attorney in that state, because these do vary, Matt. We talk a lot about Oklahoma versus Texas, or different states and their laws that go with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Making sure that you're very specific in that prompt. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned in working with AI is the more detail you can provide in that prompt and very specific around what you're looking for, what information it should or shouldn't use, providing copies of those documents or the references you want it to use and coming up with an answer will get you the most accurate answer at the end. And like you said, Justin, if you're dealing with Texas, to be very explicit about where the property is located, what the issue is, and then making sure that you tell it, I only want to understand what the rules and regulations are, case law related to minerals in Texas. Be very pedantic and very deliberate and specific around what you want it to do and what you want it to not do, and that'll get you the best result. And I think the other key thing to think about is privacy. So when you use free AI tools, a lot of what their privacy policy and things like that will tell you that you're basically, you're by using that tool, you're training the broader AI library, so to speak, that you're training that tool on your data, and that becomes part of that knowledge base going forward. So if it's something that's very private, sensitive, confidential, you got to be very careful about using AI for that type of information. And that's the caveat is when you use an AI tool, it's worth looking at the terms of service and probably paying for access to like the next level up from the free tier of these tools, and to where it gives you access to limit training AI data and opting out of that. And that's very important that you do that if you're uploading legal documents or anything that could be potentially private or sensitive, until obviously that is recorded in public knowledge. Obviously a deed that is recorded is public information, so there's limited liability there, limited issues. But if you're dealing with something that isn't public, you got to be very careful and understand the nuance and pitfalls potentially of which tools you can or can't use based on those privacy practices, and making sure you opt out of training AI to improve results if you're using it for those sensitive things. No pun intended, but AI is should be looked at as a co-pilot and not the pilot or the backseat driver, so to speak, not your driver. So you're the one still at the wheel or, flying the plane, so to speak. And so you still have to understand the basics around minerals and royalties and understand the results that you're using AI to help you with, to make sure that you catch any errors and that you know how to ask it the right questions to get the results that you're looking for. It can be a massive time saver, massive leg up in getting ahead on managing your minerals and royalties, but you just got to be careful when you use it.
I think that's good advice, Matt. And to kind of put it in a specific example, don't upload a division order with your social security number on it. You be sure that you treat AI as if it is somebody that you would like to get information from, but don't yet know well. Redact your social security numbers from that. Don't put any kind of information that's extremely sensitive. And like you said, Matt, always opt out to be sure your data is not being used for training. But also don't be oblivious when you're uploading information. Social securities are important to keep confidential. You don't want that going into AI, even if you're not opt into the training. There's small chances for things like prompt injection and things where you should guard your private materials, and certainly don't consider this to be a conversation with a trusted advisor. You could think of it as working with somebody that a stranger you'd like to ask for help.
Yeah, and it can be used, like you said, if you follow those guardrails, and it can be an extremely powerful tool. And the tools are there. The question is whether you have the knowledge to use them well to help you, or if you're going to be stuck in the past. I'm just going to say that out loud, that we can't, whether we like it or not, AI is here to stay. And I only see it becoming more part of our day-to-day lives. Whether we know it's there or not, it's going to be used, and it's going to be even more pervasive, and we can harness that for good and use it to help us, instead of saying, I'm never going to use AI. I'm not going to, I think it's a fad. I do not think it's a fad. I do think it is a foundational thing that we're going to see changes in the next, say, 5 to 10 years that we thought, were impossible. And already, it's starting with replacing jobs. And that's a whole nother conversation, about, so if you're a software developer, like just graduating college, it's a challenging time, I think, because a lot of companies are using AI agents to code and do things that we never thought possible. We thought we had to have multiple people to do that job. Now it's just out there doing it, and we have a senior person that knows what they're looking at, help review the answers and make sure that it's still correct. And I think that theme also applies to minerals and royalties. As long as we know what we're looking at, we know the questions to ask, we can leverage AI to really help us take the next step forward to take your mineral management to the next level. And again, it starts with education. If you are not a member of the National Association of Royalty Owners, highly recommend becoming a member. You can use the code MRPodcast at checkout to get $25 off your first year membership. Justin and I volunteer for that organization and feel very passionate about making sure everybody knows it's there, because there's resources out there, webinars, in-person events, and then the mineral management program, which we had covered in a past episode, which you can learn more about that program, because it covers some of these more advanced topics that I set the foundation in my mineral management basics course, and look at the narrow mineral management program as the next step in learning how to do things like do a detailed review of your revenue statement, or to calculate your division of interest, or things like that. Again, we talk about in episode 325, which is that whole mineral management program and how it can help you in your mineral management journey. And I think that, between those educational things and leverage with AI, that frankly, you can do just about anything with managing your minerals and royalties, and be come across as an expert nowadays with these tools at our disposal. So I think that's a real powerful thing that's really empowering mineral and royalty owners, as long as we know how to use it properly.
It's definitely going to be a part of the future going forward. And we're only seeing this grow in the industry, both on the mineral owner side and on the industrial side, or whether it be land buyers, whether it be title companies, operators. It's going to be a thing of the future in this industry for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, with that, thanks again for listening. And thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mineral Rights Podcast with your host, Matt Sands. Don't forget to subscribe and share at mineralrightspodcast.com. The Mineral Rights Podcast should not be construed as investment, legal, or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy.